All right, let's get going. Welcome, everyone. I'm Kira Kazantzis, CEO of Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits, and I'm very excited to kick off SVCN's Activate Your Impact 2022 Nonprofit Policy Summit and our first session, Supporting Good Trouble with Good Facilitation. This summit, which we affectionately call AYI, it's special because our learning and member engagement team and our policy team work together to bring you a unique environment of learning about the local policy topics of our day and helping us get inspired to take action and advocate. So please allow me to introduce Nick Kawada, who leads one half of this formula, our policy team. Nick.
Thanks, Kira. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nick Kawada. And as aforementioned, I am the policy director for SVCN, pronouns he, him. Thank you for joining us for our 2022 Activate Your Impact Policy Summit, where we are celebrating this year's theme of driving fearless advocacy. Each year, we convene nonprofits to answer questions on how you can take your advocacy efforts to the next level. As you all know, advocacy on behalf of our agencies and for the underserved communities we represent is essential to ensure that funding goes to the right places. And without our voices, joined with the voices of community members with lived experiences of the harms we seek to address, we cannot undo the inequities that have long plagued our communities. And now is the time. We are seeing unprecedented investment in programs that can transform the way things have been done for generations. Our efforts have been proven essential in the fight against COVID, and the pandemic laid bare the inequities our communities have faced and continue to face to this day. We know many of you have concerns about getting into the space. What can a 501c3 legally do? What can it not do? How do I do this thing called advocacy? We are here to help and provide you a roadmap for the first steps you can take. And by the end of this summit, you will be ready to jump into our special series on advocacy that we'll be rolling out in the coming weeks. If your organization is experiencing any barriers to executing your mission or working with city or county officials, we want to hear from you. You can reach me at nickk@svcn.org. That's nickk@svcn.org, or our policy and advocacy associate, Alan Guig, at alang@svcn.org, or alang@svcn.org. Say hi, Alan. I'm now going to throw it over to our fabulous learning and membership engagement director, Dan. Dan, take it away.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Nick and Kira, for welcoming everyone this morning. And thank you all for being here for the first session of Activate Your Impact Summit. We have a really great speaker ready to go, so I'm going to try to get through this housekeeping relatively quickly. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that each of us are on today. Here in San Jose, California, we are living, learning, and organizing on the land of the Muwekma and Tamia and Ohlone tribes. Together, let us commit to educating ourselves and advocating for Indigenous peoples, communities neglected and displaced by US government and other colonial powers across the world. We know folks are tuning in from different areas, so we do encourage you to learn what land you are on by using the website, which we'll share in the chat, and share your information in your introductions. And with that, while I go through some guidelines for the summit, we'd love to know who's in the room with us. Please introduce yourselves by sending your name, your title, your organization, and your native land in the chat, which Mariella will recap for you on what to share. We encourage you all to share AYI on social media by using the hashtag AYI22, Activate Your Impact and Driving Fearless Advocacy, and tagging SVCN and our presenters wherever you post. There are sure to be some great gems shared throughout the week, and we really are all about sharing resources here. So please do actively engage with us on social media, and we'll also be tweeting some of our favorite moments throughout the week. Next, for accessibility purposes, we do have automated closed captioning feature in Zoom activated. With this, you have the ability to move the captions around on your screen to a place more convenient entirely if you prefer not to have it up. To do so, please reference the bar at the bottom of your screen, click on live transcript on the right, and then click hide subtitles. If you're having any tech or other issues throughout this session, feel free to private message me directly in chat. Thank you again to our sponsors, First 5 of Santa Clara County, San Francisco Foundation, Destination Home, Stanford Children's Health, El Camino Health, Santa Clara Family Health Plan, Kaiser Permanente, and Healthier Kids Foundation for making this event possible. All of our speakers this week are excited to hear your questions, so please don't be shy about asking. Please use the chat function to send your questions both during and at the end of the session when we have some time for a Q&A. But we do ask folks to please remain on mute throughout the duration of the program. Once again, this meeting is being recorded for registrants and folks who couldn't make it today or may want to rewatch the recording later on. And with that, let's go ahead and dive in and welcome our first speaker, Meredith Curry, Executive Director of Northern California College Promise Coalition. Take it away, Meredith.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome, everyone, to my session entitled Supporting Good Trouble with Good Facilitation. Can I get a sign of reactions or thumbs up if you can see my screen? Echoing Dana's introduction, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that I'm on today as I live in San Jose, living, learning, and organizing on the land of Tamianoloni tribes, and for that, I'm grateful. I also just want to say a huge thank you to Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits, to SVCN, for presenting this week's Activate Your Impact Conference. I'm humbled and honored to be a part of this incredible selection of speakers to help you activate your impact now and in the future. Before we get started, let me just ask you a quick question, and you may have seen this already in the chat. If you have your phone, you can also take a picture of this QR code to get to this word cloud prompt. But my question for you is, when you think of advocacy or policy, what word comes to mind? And you can feel free to enter up to 3 words if you have a hard time choosing. So I'll pause here for a moment and I'll go ahead and put that link one more time into the chat. Feel free to add just 1 word, or you can fill out all 3. And give me one moment, as it looks like, of course, my mouse just went off. So give me one moment. All right, let me stop sharing my screen for one moment. If you could all forgive me for the technical difficulties for 1 second. I'll go ahead and share my screen one more time so we can see that website again. All right. And as you're finishing up with your last word, I'm going to go ahead and share and just see what words are popping up for folks as we talk about advocacy today. And so we have words like engagement, equity, communication, anxiety. And I can see that a lot of this is about the impact that we want to make, the specific topics that we want to advocate for, but also a little bit of feeling. So thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. Going back to our presentation, it's really great to meet some of you through the sentiments that you've just shared. I echo many of them, and I'll take this time to introduce myself a little bit more. My name is Mare. For today's session, please feel free to call me Mare, though my name is Meredith Curry. Pronouns are she, her. I am the executive director of the Northern California College Promise Coalition, and here locally proud to serve as a commissioner for Santa Clara County's Commission on the Status of Women, representing District 2. I'm also a board member for Lead Filipino, a member of the Northern National College Attainment Network's 2022 Advisory Task Force, and an alumni of the Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute Civic Leadership Program out of De Anza. I'm also a proud product of all 3 of the public higher ed segments here in California, which is for many reasons why I am focused on this work of supporting college access and success in the state. For today's session, the objectives are for you to find out ways you can engage multiple supporters and co-sponsors for a broader, stronger initiative. So you or your organization may already be here today thinking of something you're already advocating on, or are thinking of how to get started on supporting a bill or policy area. And I hope that you're able to learn some tidbits and tips today. You'll get examples of meeting agenda templates that work, and explore how to design an outreach toolkit. So let's start off our agenda with an intro about the Northern California Coalition, and then we'll talk about what good trouble means. All right, so founded in November 2019, the Northern California College Promise Coalition, NCCPC, is a regional effort to bring together leaders, practitioners, and resources, and share leadership over the shape of college success efforts in the region. NCCPC was formed in order to leverage the collective impact of local programs, support the scaling of those programs, and work on broad systemic change here in California. And sorry, just want to make sure you can see everything. Y'all can still hear me and see me fine? Fantastic, thank you. As of January 22, the coalition collectively serves over 58,000 students across 12 Northern California counties, including all of the Bay Area, Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Tulare, and has 32 active members representing college promise and access programs, nonprofit organizations, cities, and mayoral offices. And we are grateful to have elected and appointed officials, leaders like Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf, like Mayor Sam Liccardo, who are champions and thought partners in this work. So 30 plus organizations and advocates banded together in November 2019 for 11 in November 2019, 30 as of today, but they banded together for multiple reasons, some of which many of us are already coming to this conversation very familiar with, like low enrollment. Our most vulnerable students need support to apply to and enroll in college, and inadequate financial aid access. The students who need financial aid most experience the most obstacles to accessing and completing the steps to get the aid they qualify for. We're also seeing that to this day, still, college is not affordable. It's getting less affordable by the day, and here in California, especially the Bay Area, where we have a high cost of living, it is of serious concern to a lot of our students. College costs regularly exceed financial aid offers, leaving our students in debt or exhausted from working to cover their balance. They also enroll but do not complete. So persistence and completion are the challenges students face once they overcome the initial obstacles of access and matriculation. The economic return of a degree isn't guaranteed or equitable, and a college degree is critical to lift oneself and family out of the cycle of poverty. And even then, it's a long road to economic security, which is why so many of our members specifically support students through the continuum, both with college access while in high school and college affordability and success with scholarship and mentors during college. And some of our programs like Oakland Promise, Hayward Promise, and Rancho Cordova Promise offer supports much earlier, closer to a career to cradle continuum. Students believe that aspirations for college and careers are attainable, but reality proves otherwise. Our students are really wrestling with a mindset of lack and imposter syndrome when what they need most, and what a lot of us work hard every day to provide them so that they can pursue their dreams and make plans, are agency and affirmation. And this is why our advisory council includes intersegmental leaders like President Dr. Michael Drake of the UC and Chancellor Eloy Ortiz Oakley of the California Community Colleges, as well as Michael Tubbs, founder and board chair of Reinvent Stockton Foundation. But at our core, how are we structured? Who are we really? So first, I'm the only staff, and up until December of 2021, I was part-time. So now that I'm full-time, I can engage more deeply in advocacy and coalition building through activities like this partnership with SVCN. But so for those of you who are wondering, I don't have a full-time staff dedicated to advocacy. We are a small and lean team. I'm here to tell you, you can do it, even with one part-time staff committing any part of their effort to this. But besides myself, I work with the leaders of our steering committee, which is the governing body of the coalition. And then I facilitate the initiatives and programs that our members co-create and implement together through 4 committees aligned to our 4 key strategies. The first one, which I'll be speaking more about, which is advancing policy. Implementing campus partnerships is the second, workforce development is the third, and communities of practice is the fourth. And our shared vision is for students, especially students of color, low income, and first generation students, to make it across the pipeline to equitable value, emerging out of the cycle of poverty because they have equitable access, support, completion, all the way through equitable wealth. So to close on this intro, we started again with 11 organizations and have grown to 30 plus, and our goal is to grow to 50 members by 2023, collectively serving 100,000 students and supporting them through this collective impact approach. There are a few more slides where if you want to, you can learn more about NCCP, our impact, why organizations like Oakland Promise, Richmond Promise, and Beyond 12 participate, and how students specifically engage in and inform our work. But you can review the slides in more detail later, and I'll make sure you get a copy. I'll tell you how when we close the session. So on to our main topic, supporting good trouble with good facilitation. What is good trouble and what does it look like? For me, it looks like social justice and equity live and in full effect. not just on the surface, not just in social media posts about good intentions without anything to show for it, right? Looks like DEI and belonging in education, and as we bring students into the pipeline, and hopefully they start taking over our seats, it means disrupting old practices for new ones. Well, then what do I mean by good facilitation? When I think of good facilitation, I mean guiding conversations and not leading them, coming in with an open mind and heart to the whole person who comes to work, recognizing unconscious bias in myself and others to support thoughtful conversations, and helping others move through a fixed mindset where when I first started this work, this coalition was the first time I engaged in advocacy work. And I was coming to the table thinking, I don't know how to talk to Senator. I don't think my voice is the right voice to talk about these challenges. But thanks to this coalition and leaders modeling for me that every single one of us has a voice, every single one of us deserves to be in front of a legislator advocating for our communities, I was able to move to a growth mindset of wanting to learn how to engage in these spaces. So whether you are an intern, a fellow, an executive, an elected or appointed official, please see yourself in all of these conversations. And I hope that any of the things I share with you today help you to find your specific role at those tables. In addition to all those things that I just mentioned about how I prepare myself to engage in advocacy, I also mean building coalitions towards a shared goal for the short term or the long haul. But often these campaigns need to outlast individual champions, individual organizations, or even coalitions. It needs to move from advocacy to policy, from policy to implementation. So to build coalitions, I recommend these 4 critical factors. First, goal setting, knowing that you have a shared objective. And I can share how NCCPC did this with our members, but also a broader coalition around banning scholarship displacement here in California, which is our specific legislative priority. Building partnerships. You may already have partners and allies like those on this webinar, those who are part of SVCN that are just looking for ways to meaningfully engage. And there are those further out in our ecosystems that could have a real impact on the campaign if only you could find a way to loop them in, right? Convening, where much of the facilitation actually occurs, bringing folks together at specific frequencies and junctures to activate them for collective impact, helping folks figure out how to engage together, but also apart in meaningful ways that contribute to that shared goal. And then of course, advocating, going from talking about it to truly being about it, engaging your stakeholders in action, whether it's a support letter, social media awareness campaign, or testimonies at a hearing. You need to show folks what they need to do. And believe me, when they want to engage, they will because they know how to do it. You made it easier for them. So let's break down this thing called facilitation. Has anyone here heard of the term deliverology? If you want to use an emotion or reaction. It's also referred to as the science of deliverology. It comes out of Europe. I will think of how to add this to my blog article. Thanks to my prior work with the California College Guidance Initiative, implementing californiacolleges.edu, which is the state's free college and career planning portal. I learned about deliverology and key concepts like establishing delivery units, designing delivery chains. But a big part of that training and what I learned was how to facilitate meetings, not just well, but to drive impact. And at the core of those lessons for me, and what I've been able to test out and refine in my roles with the Northern California College Promise Coalition. Prior to this, I was also the Director of Education Partnerships for an ed tech nonprofit called MoneyThink that has a free college affordability planning tool. I'm also a Salesforce administrator for 13 years, so I've had to help different nonprofits also lean into using data and using, customer relationship management systems. All of those things require meetings. And it's this concept of meaningful meetings matter that has really stood out to me. There are procedures before, during, and after meetings, including ledge visits, that help people be successful and can create the intended impact. And something that you may or may not be thinking about now is, do you even have a meeting lead? If you don't have a meeting lead, then I would ask yourself, whose responsibility is it to make sure that folks come to your meetings prepared and engaged? If there's nothing else you get after today, my hope is that every meeting that you have has a lead who owns the why, who, what, how, and when of why folks are even meeting in the first place. The key point I want to make here that I've made with others, including deans at De Anza at their Dean's Momentum series this last fall, is that when you bring people together for a meeting and they don't know why they are there, who they're addressing, what they will contribute, how they will participate, and when they will or can engage, you're wasting people's time. Wasting time at this point with everything we've got going on with the pandemic, with the Zoom fatigue, with the continued adaptation that we need to lean into because things just keep shifting. It's like a form of disrespect at this point, especially for heart-centered work, like what many of us engage in, if we're involved with or are a member, especially of SBCN. The reasons we're here are too huge, too meaningful to bring folks together for no reason. Versus when you set them up for success, you not only respect their time, you honor their contributions of time, talent, and treasure because you fostered this creative and safe space that allows those things to flourish and for everyone to be involved. So expanding on that a bit, let's talk about my suggested tools for coalition building. First, there are going to be 2 meeting agenda templates that you'll get copies of today that you can easily clone and start using. One is for partners, like what I use with our policy committee and with our sponsors for our bill, AB 288, the California ban on scholarship displacement. And then there's a second one for ledge visits, because those are handled differently, as you might imagine. That's the one we'll go through in more detail today. Oops, excuse me. Then I'll talk a little bit more about other tools and resources such as fact sheets and FAQs, frequently asked questions documents to help you track the nitty-gritty of what you're learning and sharing about your policy, but also how you're empowering others to do so as part of that broader coalition that makes it possible to expand and grow your impact because you are not the blocker to the information getting out. Instead, you are the activator. And I've seen different groups involved in this in SBCN and across our ecosystems that are really great at distributing outreach toolkits to activate the space. So, okay, let's review NCCPC's meeting agenda for a ledge visit. Okay, in this scenario, we have 30 minutes. We have 6 practitioners. That includes a student. At this point, I do my everyday best to include a student in every legislative visit. There's just certain stories that student can tell that I cannot tell for them. And if for any reason I can't get a student, I ask them to send me their testimony and I read it on their behalf and I say I'm reading it on behalf of the student. We have an assembly member and we have their legislative director. Can I get a sign of reactions of who's actually been in a legislative visit with an assembly member or senator? Great, so we folks here who have been, and some of you may have seen, you might have 15 minutes or you may have 30 minutes scheduled and all of a sudden it's 15 minutes. So it's really important that folks come prepared, that they know what the sequence is. That way, if you have to cut, you can easily cut, but these are the 5 basic parts. Welcome and why we're here. So I would assign someone to introduce. That way you don't have to belabor everyone doing their own introduction. They can just make it for everyone. Who is here if there is time, in which case everybody knows. Alan knows he has a minute to introduce himself and SBCN. Mari knows that they're only going to talk about one specific topic for this conversation. I see somebody named Rob. Rob knows that they're going to share some specific data points about this topic, but everybody knows their touch points and how much time they have. If you don't people how much time they have, guess what? Then they don't practice to stay within that time, and then you don't get through your full agenda. And this is a really meaningful sequence. Who is in the room and why does this matter? What is their specific lens that they bring to it, hoping not to duplicate points unless it's meaningful, and sometimes it can be. Then, to the nitty-gritty of sometimes what legislators care about, how big of a deal is this? We get asked all the time how many students are impacted, how many dollars are being saved or leveraged, how much is this going to cost? Those are questions that will always come up. So being ready with those answers, or answers like, we are working with X, Y, and Z stakeholders to respond to those questions or whatever. But you can see how in a 30 minutes, that's a lot to cover. So having folks prepared and they being prepared with their talking points is incredibly important. And then ensuring that you close out what is the next steps. And I've seen people do an incredible job at this closing ask. Will you support with a yes vote at the Senate hearing? Will you contact your colleagues on the Appropriations Committee to ask for their support? But something very specific that they can say yes or no to, and whether it's a yes or no, what your follow-up will be. If it's a no, it doesn't have to be it's a no now, and we can find the stakeholders in their district who might be able to lean in and get them to, think of a different response later. But so this is the agenda we used throughout. AB 288 is now a 2-year bill. So we used this all of last year, and we're gearing up to use this again this year. And I was a fortunate National College Attainment Network Federal Advocacy Fellow. So I got to benefit from their federal advocacy templates. So this gives just a little bit more color to what they suggest we prepare for. So just highlighting a few things that might stand out is leave behinds. So something that you will email them before or after, where it will remind them, what did y'all just talk about? Because they have, if they only met for you for 15 to 30 minutes, guess how many more of those they had that day? So making it easy for them to remember you, for them to remember the important details you shared. And sometimes the legislator will actually not show up last minute, which means you really are leaning on the legislative director or aide or fellow to share on your behalf. So even more important to have those leave behinds. I have gotten adept at both facilitating and taking notes, but it is much better when those are 2 separate roles. So I would highly encourage having someone else do that. And again, you get a copy of the slide when you get a copy of this deck. The other 2 things I just wanted to share out in terms of resources to get ready to prepare. The first is a fact sheet. And I wanted to note this because a lot of bills and policies tend to have one, but some don't. So I tend to always encourage folks, like we get a lot of asks at the coalition to share bills and policies and proposed bills with our members. And without that fact sheet, we don't know the headline. Not everybody can read a bill language or sift through it to understand what does this really mean for students or whoever your stakeholders are. So a fact sheet is really critical in terms of summarizing here, for example, what is the summary statement? What does the bill do? What is the background statement summarizing the problem? What is a problem statement that goes deeper into who's affected? So in what ways are they impacted in terms of numbers and financials? How has COVID really challenged things for the worst? And then the solution then goes into more detail on the bill's intentions. And ideally, you include your list of supporters because that will help different elected officials to really understand, who does this impact? Does this impact people in my region? Do people in my region care about this? And then contact information. Nice to haves, I don't see on every fact sheet, so I just wanted to call it out, would be a last updated date, especially now that there are more 2-year bills. And then also there's bills that are kind of taking over for bills that didn't make it through last year. And then footnotes, if you want folks to really understand the why of your policy, you're probably going to reference it high level in your problem, but give them the ability to dig deeper. All right, and then we have the support form. So you've been meeting with people, great. People are supporting your work, great. How can you leverage those great names and organizations for things like hearings when it goes to appropriations? And one way is to get folks to officially sign on as supporters. So our fact sheet has organizations that officially signed on. And the way that we did that was by using a Google form. You could also use, I have Forum Assembly, there's SurveyMonkey, other things that you can use. But it makes it easier to collect from a lot of different organizations, their formal support. You can get the information you need easier. And one of the things I wanted to share is it wasn't until this year that it was actually recommended we include individuals sign on, which makes a ton of sense because scholarship displacement touches a lot of different people, especially students. And we wanted students to be able to advocate and sign on. but also because organizations are at different levels of maturity in terms of being able to officially sign on to things. And so just as an individual, you can still sign on, right? Not the official organization. So I would encourage you, when that makes sense, to consider it. And what we did was we made it super clear, are you signing on as an individual or an organization? And then the last thing I would say is, because you don't know what will happen with your bill as it moves through, or whether you're working on a proposed bill, you may want to already get a sense of if people can give testimony or call in for public comment. So using this form is also a great way to get that initial kind of opt-in, so that you know who you're going to target when usually it's a really short turnaround. You find out that it's scheduled for a hearing and you need to get people prepared for it. And last, what we do with the support form, besides the fact sheet and adding them to the supporters, was an actual support letter, which we ended up submitting to the Assembly, which fortunately made it through the Assembly on January 31st. So now we're getting ready for the Senate, and we'll do something similar then. But I wanted to share this because, again, like many of you probably get asked to sign on to support letters or get asked to submit a support letter, and make it easy, provide the template. A lot of groups do a good job at this, like the Education Trust West and other folks. Just provide the letter already with the specific points you want made. They can always add to it, but the easier you can make it for them, the better. And it'll include certain things like, who is it directed to? Is it the chair or vice chair of that committee? What are you asking them to adopt? Who will it impact, et cetera? All right, so I'm going to pause there, and I'm sure you all have questions. I didn't get a chance to stop and look and see if there were any questions in the chat, so give me one moment to just check that out really quick. I don't see anything, so maybe what we'll do is for now go into this first group activity. And so what I'm going to do is put a link in our chat for a Padlet. And I believe this was tested earlier, so you shouldn't have any issues accessing it. But I wanted to give us this opportunity to spend some time together thinking of what was just shared and actually using it to practice together. So we have a fairly decent sized group, actually, which I'm very, very grateful for. We have 32, but we decided not to do breakouts just to save time. So what we'll do is we'll do this as a large group activity. Check out the Padlet link I've just posted in the chat. And what we'll do is we'll start with the first activity with that first column. So what we're going to do is think of that meeting template and complete it, but really high level for now. So this meeting is going to be about doubling Pell. We are expecting there to be 8 people in attendance. For those who might not be familiar with Pell, I'm going to drop NCAN's leave behind for California and how Pell impacts us here in the state of California. And what you're going to do is you're going to select the question or questions with this 3-minute brainstorm that really speak to you the most. And I want you to use the add comment feature to provide some possible ideas. So with this 3 minutes, we're going to brainstorm. Why does double Pell matter? If that feels like it stands out to you, go ahead and jot down some ideas of why this matters as possible talking points during this meeting. Who should say something on the topic, given that we have these various partners here? So especially if that idea of students speaking out really spoke to you, you might want to note that. And what type of student, is it a college student who's already, experiencing financial aid? Is it a high school student who wants to get the strongest aid? What should they say based on their perspective? If you said high school student says X, for example. And last, how and when they should engage. I talked about a little bit of a possible sequence. So if that feels like structure is where you want to lean into, you can add comments there. So does that make sense in terms of a way forward? Y'all can access the Padlet. And we're going to start in this first column. So maybe pick 1 or 2 of the top questions and just start adding comments. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and give you a 3 minutes. Let's make it 2 minutes. Thank you so much, everyone, for already starting to add your comments. It's super helpful for me to see what you're adding. You have about another minute if you want to close out. And for those who might still be thinking of where to add, looks like we don't have any responses yet for what the talking, ooh, there it is. And how and when. And I think I saw a little bit, so I might be able to pull from different areas for this answer. But if you want to finish that last thought. And then our second one would be the support letter one. So let's just hold off on the second one until I share with you those prompts. So just focusing for now on the structured agenda. All right, closing out with your last comment. Great. Now, may I please have, looks like folks weren't signed in. So I'm not sure who made which comment. But I would love to see if there is a brave volunteer for the why who'd want to share out one of the points that were made around why doubling Pell should a possible point at this meeting. And feel free to unmute yourself, or if you'd like to, you can add it to the chat and I'll read for you. I don't see any hands raised and no one's jumping at the gun, and we don't have enough time for me to practice my classroom management skills and just be silent. So I'm going to point at the one that says, makes college more affordable and better meets the needs of low-income people of color communities. So using that as a specific point and leveraging our leave behind, there could be data actually shared about the specific low-income communities here in California that are impacted, but also we might want to build on that for like a regional voice. If, for example, we were meeting with, I don't know, Assemblymember Evan Lowe and talking about like the specific experience, like here in this county or in the region that matters to him, for example. So that is definitely a good point in terms of making things more affordable and hammering in on the specific communities impacted. So, okay, going to who? Would anybody like to volunteer to share why they said students?
I can go.
Thank you.
So yeah, a theme in these responses was definitely that students should be centered in the conversation. And I think that this is because they're the real experts on this. They're the ones who have experienced this and they can speak on behalf of their lived experience. And then I think in terms of who else should speak, somebody who is in that room, who's a partner, who is well-versed in the statistics and logistics of it would probably be another good person to speak.
Thank you so much for sharing out. I appreciate that. And yes, +1 to the idea of whoever is most expert at the topic should ideally be at the table sharing. Can I just get a sign of reactions? If you already work with students, are students already at these tables with you talking about legislation? Yes, that's what I'm talking about, Gabby.
Sorry, well, one of the things actually, we try to make an extra effort to reach out to student groups whenever we're advocating for different bills, whenever we take community members to the Capitol for our Muslim Day of the Capitol Advocacy Day. and actually overwhelmingly it becomes a lot of students. I think it ends up becoming half students, which is great, but we want to make sure that they're involved, especially if the legislation is about them. But one thing I added in the other column, and I know I'm maybe jumping ahead, but I think that it can be similar, both for column number 1 and column number 2, when the question is about who. I would also say like associations of professors or having school board members, or actually I think somebody else put school board members. I mentioned student leadership groups. I think that would also be helpful to add.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought that up, Samina. Great to see you. One of the awesome things that has happened during this partnership with, so we are the lead sponsor of this bill, and we actually brought on co-sponsors last year, Southern California College Access Network down in LA and Scholarship America. And one of the things that came out of those conversations was to engage all of the student senates. So we actually have the UC Student Association, the Cal State Student Association, MSA, Muslim Student Association West, and the Student Senate of the California Community Colleges. So yes, whenever you can engage them, they're doing their own policy and advocacy work. So the more that they can find out of what else is going on that touches their constituents, the better. Awesome. And so just closing out on this last item before we move to the next activity, what are some of their talking points and what might be the order? So we noted how I appreciate this point, doubling Pell Grant advances racial justice. And some folks do have trigger words or words that they're trying to make sure they're in alignment with. So it's good to incorporate, especially if we want, they have a high Black student population in their community, things of that nature, identifying those specific data points. And I appreciated how earlier it said, let students talk first at the beginning. And that's a great example of how to get really crisp on the sequence, right? So it's like student tells their story first, makes it a really individual, I see a person, and then amplify it with all of a sudden a data person going after, talking about it in their constituents region, and then amplifying it for the state as an example. Awesome. So, okay, let's move to the second prompt. So in this case, we're now going to talk about the ban on scholarship displacement, which is AB 288. So that's the goal. We just did a support letter to the Assembly. So this one will be a support letter to the Senate. We have 3 sponsors. We have 260 total folks. We have 1 million expected students impacted. So the question here is, rather than preparing for a meeting, we're preparing to conduct a really strong support letter. So for the person who asked what would this be for, the goal is banning scholarship displacement. For those who are unfamiliar with scholarship displacement, I'm going to go ahead and put the link to our campaign in the chat. The headline is that students who receive the most recent report that came out in October is that 50% of students who receive a scholarship experience displacement, where then another part of their financial aid package is manipulated because of the recognition of that scholarship, which often means to a student having 0 net gain. And the reason this was brought up by our coalition is because we have a lot of scholarship programs, and they're helping their students navigate this in real time. But think of all the students who are not advocating or reporting this issue, or don't even know that it's happening, or are not looking closely to their financial aid awards. So same process. Go ahead and add to the why. Why does this matter? Who, and I'm glad there's already some notes there if you'd like to contribute to it, especially now that you know a little bit more about it. What should new supporters contribute? And it could be things like data, specific student stories in specific regions, or representing specific institution types. There might be assumptions this only happens to students going to private colleges, but it happens to students going in any type of college. And same, how and when. So I'll give you 2 minutes, setting the timer now. All right, let's give it maybe another minute to add your last points. And again, I really appreciate the engagement. There are some ideas that have been posted that have been new to me, so I'm excited to bring some of this to our policy committee. Ooh, yeah. I appreciate a lot of the different points that were made here. There are some of these sound bites I would give to a student to give, because it just feels like it'd be so much more powerful coming from them as a way to close out their story. I also just wanted to say I was excited to see the addition of parents. And I know that for us, we're also trying to understand this better, how to bring them into this, because often they don't. They're dealing on the back end, you know, of their students experiencing this displacement. They're also trying to encourage their students to apply to scholarships. This kind of practice discourages that. So I think that's one of the things I want to continue to think about as well. One of the things I didn't see in terms of who should be included here that we're starting to think about are foundations themselves, because foundations often are giving the funds to fund scholarships, not knowing that this could be the potential outcome. That is just another way of like thinking of like outside of the direct stakeholders that are impacted, those who are kind of feeding into the system and this idea of like closing their gap, but like that's not really what's happening in real time. So I really appreciate your feedback. The credibility thing is really is real about the supporters, especially for us. We were a new nonprofit, we're a small organization. Some folks still haven't heard of us. So to see Scholarship America added greater credibility in terms of the sponsors. And then, you know, when it came to like Northern California legislators, for example, to see all the Northern California-based scholarship programs and promises was really powerful as well. So thank you. I hope that you found that impactful in some way to be able to hear about kind of what we've done and actually try to step into that brain for a moment. So as we start to close, let's just recap what we reviewed together today. So we talked about how you can, the different ways you can engage multiple supporters and co-sponsors for a stronger initiative, whether it's double Pell, whether it's scholarship displacement, whatever is the issue that's near and dear to your individual heart or your organization's mission. We walk through examples of meeting agenda templates, and you'll get clonable examples that you can take back with you and turn into your own template. And we talked a little bit about outreach toolkits and the things we need for it, like support letter forms. So in terms of what's next after today, so I actually went ahead and wrote a blog article that recaps all of today's resources as well as the deck. So you can access it in that link I just posted. So you'll get a copy of this deck as well as the different links you see here. If you want to learn more about, for example, what the coalition is doing, or you're interested in seeing if we would be able to support some of the work that you're doing, please consider joining a committee meeting. You would just let me know and I can invite you. Also, if there's other ways you want to engage, there's tons of opportunities here locally and across the country. NCAN has an advisory task force. They have different fellowship programs. There's also WACAC, and they're looking for leadership roles right now. And lastly, I'm a fellow of the American Association of University Women. They have their own grants or fellowships, and their own board is another way of engaging. And then I did want to just note, so again, you have that access to that article. And for those of you who are specifically interested in this topic of college affordability, so we have policy as a pillar where we do the advocacy work. We also have communities of practice where we try to bring the field together. And so we actually have a financial aid webinar series starting next week. Our partners are the UC Office of the President, Immigrants Rising, Cal State, and they will be showcasing for free and in a virtual format how they package, because every institution is different, how they deal with scholarships, For those who want to learn more about scholarship displacement, we'll have a webinar from College Track, but I encourage you to register for that. And I just put that link in the chat. And with that, I just want to thank you all so much for your time today. Contact me if you'd like to learn more about anything I've shared. I'd love to open it up now for questions before I pass it on to our colleagues at SVCN to close out our session, and encourage you to attend the next one. All right, I'm starting to see some questions in the chat. I think I'm seeing claps and not hands raised. I believe that that's what that is, but let me just double, triple check in the participants list. And if you could just give me 1 second, I'm gonna look at the order of the questions real quick. This is an interesting question. Could you help provide some strategies on how to counter pushback from elected officials to your proposals? That is a great question. I hope that there's a lot of different advice that you're going to be able to get around this topic from the various sessions, because I don't know that there's a one size fits all for that. What we have found is that by engaging stakeholders in the regions where those specific officials are, that helps. So for example, if it's an official in LA, it may not be strong for us here in the Bay to continue to, lean into that official. We may need to find a partner specifically in that region. If we don't have someone in San Diego, we're going to find someone in San Diego. But sometimes there's insight into the why of that pushback that we don't have, because we're not in the region where their politics are. So that can be helpful, getting that kind of regional insight, which is another reason why for us, especially during the pandemic, this virtual coalition building has been incredible, because we've been able to have ledge visits with people from across the state. So when I met with legislators last year on doubling Pell, we had folks from as far north as Humboldt, as far south as San Diego, and Central Valley. And that is just a good way to hear from a stakeholder in their specific region. And great ad from Gabby, find out what legislators can't afford to make angry and have them join the coalition. That's a good one. Kyra has a good question. Kira has a good question. I've been in legislative meetings where the official starts talking right off the bat and derails the entire meeting. How to solve for that problem. So part of how we've tried to solve for that problem is by sending the agenda in advance, so that it's kind of clear that we have a slate of speakers, especially if we note that there's a student, because then they'll pause to create the space for that student to speak. And then I have just kind of, thank you so much for starting to share that. I just wanted to see if we could pause for a moment. I have had to do that. It is super awkward. That's me leaning into the discomfort for the sake of putting the meeting back on track. So there are some uncomfortable things to do, which is why it's helpful to have a meeting lead. It's helpful to have someone in charge of the introduction. And sometimes we found someone with like maybe a stronger personality or who's willing to do that, to be that intro person, so that to make sure we get on topic. So that's a really good question. And that's a good one in thinking about who you have on your team that will be there, that you can assign to do that, because they're comfortable with doing that. And then, worst case, you can't get them to get back on track. You just schedule another follow-up meeting. And I know that it's hard. Scheduling is difficult, but some things we don't have in our control, and what we do is the ability to try to get back on the books. Let's see, I don't know if I've missed any other questions, and Alan, Marissa, or anyone else, if I've missed a question, let me know. Oh, and I love the idea of role-playing different scenarios. And I've especially with students have done that. It helps them feel more set up for success, working on their talking points in advance. So we've worked on talking points in advance. And when possible, for example, like once we're starting to gear up for a series of meetings, we have one big planning meeting. And that's the opportunity to be like, okay, for this meeting, you're gonna lead, for this meeting, you're gonna lead. Here are the talking points, so we know there's no overlap, et cetera. And then, yeah, again, role play, practicing in a mirror. Well, I just wanted to note there's 3 minutes left. I'm not sure if I've missed any questions, but if I have, I believe I'm getting a copy to all the questions. And I'm happy to share any answers with the SVCN team. But I just wanted to again thank everybody so much for joining me for today's session. For those who are watching the recording, a special shout out to Alan and Nick, who were hugely supportive in getting ready to present to you today. And please reach out if there's any questions or any insight or even any pushback to some things I shared. Like, we can grow as well and enhance and extend. So thank you for letting me be in community with you all.
Before folks leave, we do have a few announcements to make. But first, thank you, Mayor, so much for sharing all of these practical tips on supporting good trouble with good facilitation. It's been really great to kind of hear how you've been incorporating these tactics into your work to support students. And we hope folks have taken something away from this session and the great resources that we know you'll be sharing out.